Welcome to this episode of Mosaic Days, where we talk about all things education, including student achievement and outcomes, professional development and training, and lights, camera, action, and accountability. I am your co host, Leonard Martinez.
And I'm Allison Smith.
We're doing a remote episode because one of us is on a much needed vacation. That being me.
Lucky, just, breaking free. That's what happens when your children are nice and old.
Uh,
You do whatever you want, whenever you want, and have some freedom. It's pretty nice.
yeah, but my vacation looks a lot different than I would say normal people's vacation.
Because you
My
work
vac
the whole time.
Well, yeah, because I can't really unplug, 'cause I could start freaking out, and it's just it's a short trip.
Mhm.
But I always appreciate when I'm able to get out of town for just a couple of days to recharge. That's I think we talked about that in our wellness episode, right? We need that recharge.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's super important, especially this time. That's a fun one in education because it's a long month. You don't have any holidays, you don't have any days off. And this is kind of the March slump, as you call it. Teachers are burned out,
Yeah.
administrators are burned out after the holidays, getting into kind of end of the year and all the chaos that comes with end of the year.
Yeah, we got state testing coming up. If you're a sixth grade or eighth grade or a 12th grade
Hmm.
or getting on that 22, there are ceremonies you got to plan for and activities you got to plan for. Everyone's just struggling to get to spring break, which is probably coming up in a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, mine is not aligned with my children. So, that's another fun one.
I mean, but well, the flip side of the optimist side of that says, well, then you get time for yourself to recharge and you don't have to worry about doing that other stuff.
Sure, but then I got to pay somebody to watch my children during their spring break. But no, they're next week and mine is in a couple of weeks. So
No, I can be available for a nominal fee or
yeah,
find someone, get my kids
exactly.
to do it for a nominal fee.
Exactly. See, paid, always paid to take care of my children. Yes.
Right, I'm gonna get out of vacation mode for a second and tell us what's on our agenda for today.
So this is a controversial one that has just recently come up, only because I think some state, I believe one state, officially implemented this, and it's the cameras, in special education self-contained classrooms.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a
So
when you say that, that just is striking. Just to hear those words come out of your mouth is striking.
yeah, and so this just broke news. I mean, it's been something that has happened for a few years, just in the sense of people talking about it in different states talking about it. But I believe that it was passed. It's Louisiana. That's Act number 479. That was passed in 2025. But as of February 1st of this year, 2026, they officially had to roll it out. So they are required to have the mandate that cameras are in all special education self-contained classrooms.
Yeah, so very distinct difference, right? We're not talking about general ed classrooms. We're not talking about general ed classrooms that have special ed kids in them. We're really talking about our more, I'm assuming mod severe CBI type setting, alt pathway setting. Those classrooms will have cameras in them.
Yeah, and they're saying the more mod severe, the students, and I think the proponents of it are saying that it is specifically for those students that are unable to advocate for themselves. So, students that struggle to communicate, students that struggle to let anybody know that something's going wrong, and so they felt, and with severe behavior, so they felt that cameras would be the supportive measure to hopefully reduce the number of negative incidents that potentially occurred in these classrooms.
And I'm assuming this applies to non-public schools as well, or
I'm
no?
thinking so. I mean, it didn't, the law wasn't specific to that. Just public schools, I think in general, I would assume that it would be all schools within Louisiana. I mean, it is an official act that was passed as of February 1st.
And we can also assume that the state is going to pay for this and not have the local education agencies bear the burden of paying for these camera systems.
Well, that's what they say, but we always talk about that, right? Where the money comes from. They
It's
say
a
they're
it's a
gonna they're gonna
mandate.
pay
Yeah,
for
it's a
it.
mandate only if they pay for it is what at least what we have in California, those stipulations. So I'm hoping that the state is assisting some of these other states. Us in California, we do not have that yet. Um, do you think the growing number of students with cell phones that are capturing? I mean, we see this in our social media feeds where there's kids filming fights all the time. Do you think this is kind of going along those lines of, and we know with COVID and with anxiety and depression and fights, physical fights, that most cameras do have some basic camera system set up outside of the classroom on common areas, public spaces. But bringing them into the classroom, I'm still not sure how I feel about that. And then we can kind of get into what we think the purposes of this are. Is this really to protect students or is it to protect staff? What is the purpose of this?
So I think it was a combination. So I read a number of things where it is quote unquote parents being more involved in their students' education. That to me, there's some part of this where we want to make sure that we are supporting student independence, right? And so when students are growing up, it's the whole thing of, hey, kindergarten, the first few weeks, you can drop your kid off and hang out for a few minutes. But then after a few weeks, it's time to kind of let your kids just go and do their own thing. So some people are saying, well, it promotes involvement of parents in the classroom. Some people say, some of these students with extreme behaviors, it gives parents insight into what happens during the school day, and it helps support and provide, those different levels of supports and behavioral modifications that need to occur so that there can be a homeschool connection. So a lot of just claims that this promotes more support for students. But then I do feel that some of it is to protect possibly the disciplinary measures that happen to some of these students when they do have extreme behaviors, and how staff, whether or not they're equipped to actually be able to support those students.
This is where and some states do have this. It's not just Louisiana. Other states do have some type of form of this. But this isn't, I mean, just to make this differentiate, this is not a live stream that a parent, like, our Ring or Arlo systems, where it's a live stream where I can just go on an app and see what's happening at the classroom at any time. One of the things I was concerned about is who's monitoring these cameras. You can't have a full-time staff member monitoring these classrooms from a like a security station where we take a look at the movies where you see 50 screens on
Yeah.
the monitors that someone's monitoring. I'm wondering, how is this tool utilized to promote student safety if that's the goal?
Well, I believe that it's similar to what we use right now for students for disciplinary measures, like you were mentioning, where we have students outside, or cameras outside monitoring hallways, monitoring playgrounds, monitoring bathrooms, for any sort of potential fights or drug usage or, possible weapons. So I think it is similar to that, first of all, you can go back and you can review it. So administrators can go back and actually review the tapes. There was something to be said about some districts or some states had said, well, we're going to keep this feed for 30 days. Others said it's going to be available for 1 year. I just
Data
I just
centers.
wonder.
This is why we have all these data centers popping up across the country.
Yeah, and so they were saying, I was also reading this interesting article where it was saying that in the past it would be very costly to keep this amount of video feed because you'd have to have storage. Now everything can be kept on the cloud. So even in the school setting, you can have more and more security cameras set up because everything is just stored in the cloud and it's easy to access, and then you have it there and can remove it, after a set amount of time. I just wonder, like, how many parents are going to sit there and say, "Oh my gosh, this happened to my kid. Let me go and let's take a look at the tapes. I want to go look at the tapes. What happened? She came home with a bruise. Let me go see. Let me go see." I mean, I imagine it being a big problem for administrators.
But also teachers and unions. I'm sure, how do the
Hmm.
unions ever sign off on this? I mean, this is one can view this as very invasive.
Hmm.
This is my classroom. These are my practices, and now you're going to scrutinize everything we do. I get the safety part of it. I'm really surprised that unions were able to agree to something that would allow cameras in the classroom. But you bring up a good point. Is the video going to be stored for 30 days? Some of these things are reported for weeks afterwards. In
Hmm.
30 days, some footage might be gone already. So I don't think we'll probably see this in California anytime soon. But what do I know?
Well, our union is very strong here, so I don't know, and I think it would be interesting to see what the teachers union felt about this. That would be kind of an interesting thing to follow up on, because I would imagine that there is a level of privacy. Whereas, some people say it should be an open door, and teachers should just allow anybody at any point to come into their classrooms and be able to observe. But we're talking about, number one, these are teachers that are working with really, really students with severe needs, right? And so watching their every move, I can just imagine as a teacher, that would feel very invasive. Um, I would be concerned about it personally. Not that I would be
Yeah.
doing anything wrong, but it's just somebody watching you all day, every day, you wonder about that, how that could be comfortable for anybody.
But that's the thing, though. I don't think no one has staff to monitor these
Hmm.
camera feeds 24/7. So I'm a little concerned on how it can be viewed. I imagine that does this become part of student records now, and
Ugh.
you can request student records. Is this available through subpoena? So you start thinking about some legal concerns that might come up in student privacy with the other students in the classroom. So
And that's what I was going to say exactly as you said that. It just clicked in my head. What about those parents that have issues with their own students being seen on this camera? And then a parent comes in and requests footage of their child, but then all these other children are a part of it as well. There would definitely be some privacy laws broken, I feel.
yeah, and again, I'm not. I'm all about transparency. I mean, I really am. When I was in the classroom, I always had an open door policy. I wanted parents to come in. I wanted parents to work with us and collaborate with us so they can see how we were working with their children, so they can develop some of that skill set to utilize at home. So I'm all for about the transparency of this. I just think it might put people on a heightened alert that might interfere with some of the teaching practices. I, if we're all mandated reporters, so is there AI involved with analyzing the
Mm.
camera feeds? And we have seen, unfortunately, over the years, we always see an article or a news story or two or three or four throughout the year that shows staff members, either emotionally being aggressive with students or physically being aggressive with students. So I get the height need, and we are talking about a vulnerable population, right? So here's my alignment with this notion of cameras. We have kids that are nonverbal, and things happen to them throughout the school day. And if something does happen to them horribly, and they don't have the verbal ability to communicate to that parent, then how are we supposed to support that student? So I'm just I guess my concern is if we have an incident in the classroom, how quickly are we going to respond and be able to see the camera feed? And then what do we do that? We follow along with mandated reporting. Do we report it to the police? Do you report it to HR so HR can intervene with the staff? So I'm wondering if this is proceduralized. I would like to think that this is proceduralized, and so when admin know what are the steps to take if we have a violation that's caught on camera.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely some aspects of that that make a lot of sense, that we need to, it makes sense now. We
Yeah.
we we need to there's a lot that goes on. But then, I go back to, are we then going to provide consistent training to staff and regular training to staff so that there is consistency in approach to how we're working with kids? Because I can imagine anybody going in, and when you're not in there, I mean, you've been in some of the most severe classes.
Hmm.
When you are in there and something happens with a student, there's always well, I could have done this or I could have done that, but every student is different. And so in those moments, especially if a violent
Hmm.
situation comes up, there's also that safety for an adult that needs to occur. And, did I handle it in the best way, or did I handle it in the way that was able to keep me and my staff safe? I just can imagine that there are lawyers are going to have a field day with this because they're going to be able to pick it apart and say, well, you should have done this, you should have done that. Well, it's
Yeah.
easy in the moment to say that, but this is for extreme situations.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% because if you see two students fighting in a room, for example, and you break it up and hurt a kid, now you're going to be criminally responsible.
Yeah.
If you don't intervene, will you be responsible for not intervening? So, so I would think that if I was a staff member in a classroom and something was happening in there, I might be hesitant to respond on just because how that might be perceived on the camera. Now,
Hmm.
are there multiple cameras in the classroom? Is it one camera? Are there blind spots? So the other logistics to it also kind of play into it. But if I'm a if so, let's take a look at an NCI physical intervention, right? We see a kid who's having some behavioral challenges and is starting to attack staff members or the students, and we go into a physical intervention. Is that going to be criticized now?
Hmm.
Because do parents really know that at times there's staff members that do use physical interventions on students, and supposedly we're trained to do it right and implement it safely and effectively as a last resort to keep other staff and students safe. But how is that going to be perceived negatively now?
Well, and that's a good question, because NCI has specific things that you need to non-crisis intervention. We should probably say what it is. But you've got this NCI where there's certain holes that need to occur, and then a parent suddenly sees you restraining their child,
Mhm. Mhm.
and they're freaking out. Oh my gosh, they put their hands on my child. But at the same time, like that child could have attacked others, could have thrown something, could have, banged themselves into a wall or a window or a door, and so do we really have the full understanding? Are parents given that full understanding of sometimes what needs to occur in a classroom? So again, I just think, given the situation, I do think that there's going to be a lot of issues with this in
Uh-huh. Do
regards
you
to
know
legal aspects.
if this is also recording audio as well or just video?
Oh, that I don't know. I didn't read anything.
Okay.
All I know is that it was required to have one camera in every single classroom. So, so some people did bring up, well, what about some of the hidden areas maybe in the
Yeah, for sure.
classroom?
Yeah, and then and I would also think context is everything, right?
Hmm.
Because if you don't have that audio feed going, you don't see how a staff might be trying to de-escalate a situation prior to going into a physical intervention. And so I'm
Hmm.
hoping that when they're looking at utilizing these cameras in the classroom, there's also an audio feed that goes along with that.
Hmm.
Now, I'm assuming that the unions have said, hey, that you cannot use this for evaluative purposes.
That's a great question. I do. I really, now that you've brought that up, I really do want to take a look into that, maybe for a future episode and just look at how did the unions respond to this? How were they okay with this? What was their overall, is this a part of our evaluation? Is this something that can be used against us as teachers? Um, uh, uh, the evaluative process for teachers is not supposed to be punitive, right? It's supposed to be supporting growth. So, is there an aspect of this that is going to be held against them? How can it not be held against them if, an administrator is regularly watching them having to restrain students or put them in a hold. I mean, how is that? How is an administrator going to be able to utilize that information appropriately?
Yeah, so I'm assuming it's in the contract that can't be used for evaluative purposes. I'm assuming there's notices up everywhere because we have paraeducators in the room.
Hmm.
I'm wondering if the parents have to sign off on saying, "Hey, I agree," or that's
Hmm.
just it's implied consent that your kid's going to be. What if I don't want my kid filmed?
Well, that's the other thing, right? I mean, we have to do that every single year. Brand new year, we have to say, yes, I want my child photographed, or no, I do not agree to their name being present, their image being present. I mean, what if you do disagree with that? The other thing is that in some of the other states that are considering this, I know you had noted Texas, Alabama, Georgia, and I believe West Virginia actually has a mandate that also was passed. Um, a lot of those are with parent requests. So, although it has not been mandated in every single special education self-contained classroom, parents can request that. Well, what if one parent wants it, but the other nine
Yeah,
parents do not want it? How
yeah.
does that work out?
And why not put it in general ed classrooms too then?
Yeah.
I
Yep,
mean, things go on in there too, as we've come to know over the
they
past
do.
5, 10, 15, 20 years. The things happen in all classrooms. Why not all classrooms get
Yeah,
cameras in them?
I know, because the kids are filming anyways, right? We've seen that.
Well, and we do see so many videos and social media that, and we know for a fact if we're seeing 15, 20 seconds of video, it's out of context.
Hmm.
And so we may as well, why single out special ed for this?
Hmm.
I get the whole logic of being a voice, and having some ability to monitor for kids that might have communication challenges, but I don't see why this wouldn't happen in every classroom in some of these states. It really is sad and unfortunate to think that the reason why they're doing this is because we've had some incidents in classrooms, right? This wasn't being proactive. This is some states being reactive to some probably horrific situations that have occurred in the state that had students with disabilities being
Hmm.
probably assaulted, probably neglected, probably subject to some physical or emotional. And we've seen some of those videos circulate over the past few years. So I get it. I'm not against it, but I don't know if there's parameters or protocols put in place as to how this is going to be utilized and monitored, and what safety mechanisms are in place for both students and staff.
Well, and I guess one could argue that this is finally advocacy for students who can't advocate for themselves, because kids will come home with bruises and the parent says, well, how did you get that bruise? And, it's up to the parent says, or the teacher says, well, this is what happened. We had to put them in a hold. And the kid can't say what's going on. And so you just have to go with what the adult has said, right? So now this is maybe some supportive measures for that child to be able to advocate in some way on what actually really occurred during that incident.
Yeah, so I think we probably have to do some more research. I'm dying to see what the collective bargaining agreements look like if they directly address in these states the use of cameras and how the unions are able to negotiate that in there. I'm kind of curious to see what that looks like.
Yeah, and whether or not I want to know California's opinion on this. I want to know California unions what they have to say.
I or like you look at UTLA for the
Yeah.
Union for LUSD, so powerful, or CTA.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening anytime soon in our state. It doesn't mean that doesn't need to happen.
Yeah.
There's got to be again, over the years, kids get hurt for whatever reason. And when parents ask, how did my kid get hurt? Staff should have a reasonable explanation
Hmm.
as to how the kid got hurt. You can't say, I don't know, I didn't see it.
Hmm.
I don't think that's an appropriate explanation of what happened. The flip side of it is, hey, I know staff members where they say kids show up and they have bruises or scratches on them prior to them
Hmm.
getting into the classroom, and
Hmm.
so that kind of goes both ways. And I
Hmm.
get that we're trying to keep students safe, right? That's our job. I think if we and these classrooms are super small typically, and they also have typically more than one adult. So if a kid's coming home with a scratch and it's happening during the day, I would like to think our staff are aware of what's happening and try have at least have a reasonable explanation.
Hmm.
I'm assuming this is not the case in every classroom, and this is why they're using these preventive measures to support student safety.
Well, and I'd be interested to see why this came about in Louisiana, where there's some extreme cases that came up, a number of cases, and this is why legislation moved in this direction. I'd be interested to look further into that.
Yeah, I'm assuming it must have been some litigation or
Hmm.
unfortunately maybe a death.
Hmm.
And so, as a measure for safety, they're implementing the system, which I don't know. We got to see the effectiveness of it. I mean, I
Hmm.
don't know how they're collecting any data prior to the camera and ongoing monitoring of data now that the cameras are in place. I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but I mean, I guess at the least, it should be a visual deterrent for staff in that classroom to support students, right? If you know the camera's on and watching on a daily basis, then I'm assuming you're going to be supportive of all the students in the classroom, and safety is going to be a higher priority than it might be without the cameras.
One would hope.
Yeah, we got to do it. We might have to do a follow up to this one
Yeah,
because we probably need to do a little more research as to
yeah.
the basis of this and the monitoring of this, and the union involvement in coming to a decision that this is what we're going to do.
I want to go visit Louisiana. I want to see one of these in action, see what's going on.
What
Be
else you got
interesting.
for us? Anything else?
Nope, that's it for this week.
All right. Another conversation about legal issues in special ed. We thought it was important to at least have a primary conversation about this and what this might look like in California. But I'm sure we're going to revisit it, especially if it gets approved in more states around the country. so we can address that in a future episode.
Sounds good.
All right, this has been Mosaic Days. I'm Leonard Martinez.
And I'm Allison Smith. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for joining us.